Mario Anthony, it's been a few years since you were on the Kicking the Seat podcast. As an actor in a film, we were talking about DECAF Don back in the day. That was Nick Alonzo's fantastic movie, and since then I saw you also in his next film, The Big Zip, from last year. Two very different roles, but we're not
Yeah,
here to talk about a performance tonight. We're here to talk about your writing.
yeah.
Still related to film, you've got a rather unique book out called Shell of a Man, now
There it
on
is.
sale at fine retailers everywhere, I guess. It's a screenplay novel. So tell me about this. You wrote a screenplay
Yeah,
instead of a novel, but it's a screenplay that reads like it could very much. It's very literary, very literate. So it feels like I'm watching a novel, if that makes any sense. Tell me
sure. Yeah,
how did this all come about? Why did you decide to write a screenplay instead of just a straightforward book?
yeah. I think it was laziness. I mean, I think I was inspired by Monster, the novel by Walter D. Myers. I was kind of literally last Juneteenth, so the anniversary just happened a couple days ago. I was like, oh, I want to like look at some books that I have by Black authors, and I was trying to look at some of the ones that I hadn't read yet. And my sister had given me this book called Monster by Walter Dean Myers that I had. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And so I opened it, and it was a screenplay. And I knew it was a screenplay, but I had forgotten. Um, and yeah, I think just in that moment, I was literally just like something like a light bulb went off, and I was like, I think I want to publish my screenplay. I had been writing this screenplay. I'm 25 now. I started it when I was 18, and it was just this like thing that, to be very specific, I was like, okay, 2020, I'm gonna make this movie. Like, and then of course 2020. So it
Yeah.
was like in the middle of 2020 in that very specific time, and I just was like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna go for it. And it was, I mean, I think as artists, we all kind of have these moments where we just like say things that feel right in the moment. But I feel like for me particularly, I do get obsessive over things when I do try to go for them. So I became obsessive over it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to publish this. And then I think at a certain point, I was like, okay, maybe I should, change the format and make it more novel friendly. And but I felt like it worked on its own as a screenplay. I really was confident with the material, even though there was a lot of changes that happened from that point. I mean, yeah. So, but I was confident with it. I thought it worked on its own, and that it had merit on its own as a story, that it didn't need to be changed and written as a novel per se, but it could still work on its own in the format that it was already written in.
So the story centers on Vincent, who's a young man. I think he's 23 or so, right? Um,
Yes.
and he's in the Navy. And as we meet him, he's sort of leaving the Navy on some kind of a furlough or a leave. We'll
Yeah.
find out more about that. I'm not going to spoil anything for
Yeah.
the movie slash book that you've
Yeah.
written. But he goes back
Like,
home. Yeah, well, he goes back home to Chicago, stays with his sister Mona and her fiance Sean. They're expecting a baby, and
yep.
he kind of goes out. At one point, he's set up on a disastrous blind date, unbeknownst to him. And there's a couple of different encounters with women, but there's this one that seems to stick, and that's Faye. And the heart of the book is their sort of relationship over this crazy whirlwind month, and what kind of future could they have together, will they have together. And in the midst of all that, there's this mystery surrounding what is going on with Vince and this Navy leave, and some great dream sequences that pop up, not just for him but for other characters in the book.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack here, as they say. So you said you've been working on this idea for 7 years. Where did that? I'm going to ask you the bullshit author question. Where did the idea
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was several things. So it's not a bullshit question because it has a lot of history in terms of, I mean, so the seed that was planted to come up with the overall concept of like this writing about this very impulsive kind of character was myself. I was interrogating myself at a certain point at 18 for the first time, and I was just trying to understand parts about myself that I didn't fully understand, if that makes sense. I was being very impulsive. I think it's, you know, it's said that Vincent is an impulsive character, so this isn't a spoiler for anyone that hasn't read it. But yeah, he kind of makes these decisions on a whim that he doesn't consider the consequences of. And that was something that I did for a long time when I was younger, and I think that's kind of where it started. And then the little the little parts of the little idiosyncrasies of the characters that are kind of smaller and made them more unique were just snowballed over a period of time of kind of looking at different people in my life, looking at different elements of my own life and kind of piecing everything together. I think it started with this idea of like writing about someone who doesn't have regard for consequence when they make certain decisions. And then it became, I mean, honestly, it started off as something that I didn't want to give too much thought to. I really was like, I was writing a series at the time, and I was very obsessive about this series. And I might say that word a lot because I can be obsessive when it comes to certain things. But I had a moment where I was like, you know, I want to have a Lena Dunham moment. Do you know that? Did you ever see Tiny Furniture, the Lena Dunham movie?
No, I mostly know her from
Yeah,
Girls. I saw some of
yeah.
that.
I didn't honestly. I didn't see it either, but I did see the pilot for Girls, and I did know about Tiny Furniture. But I was basically in a moment where it was like at the time where she was very hot, and I was like, you know what? I feel like with this series, it's a little too ambitious. I might need to like scale it back a little bit and just like write a scrappy, like, you know, independent movie that I can just make in the vein of Lena Dunham. Not that I'm like inspired to do everything she's done, but I was inspired by her at that time to do like, to start off with this movie that was like, she filmed that in her home, I think. And she like, you know, I mean, the budget was not a budget that I'm familiar with, but it was a humble beginning for her. For me, it would be much humbler, but I just wanted to do that, and then it became a big passion project. So that was like my mistake of thinking I was going to write something that I wasn't going to be super invested in. But yeah, there were so many different things around that time in my life. I mean, obviously, you know, being 18 is not that interesting, but yeah, there was just a lot of different elements of my life and other people's lives that I kind of threw into the story. But it did start with myself and trying to like peel back the layers of my own decision making. So yeah.
You say being 18 isn't that interesting. Now, that is a that's a perspective that, well, it certainly doesn't usually come from an 18-year-old. So I wonder, you started working on this thing as you're 18 as a method of exploring yourself and kind of your own consciousness and why you are the way that you are, do the things that you do.
Yeah.
How had that changed in the, over the course of the 6 or 7 years as you're developing this idea? Even if you're not writing it down, I'm sure you're thinking about the character and what situations would they be in. And I imagine Vince doing things, even if he is impulsive, is going to look a little different when he's 24 versus
Right.
when he's 18, assuming that you are the Vince character you're kind of writing yourself.
Yeah. Well, I will say it's not autobiographical. So
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure that you know that, but just to be clear, like I gave him a lot of myself, but I gave him a lot of other people as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy to think about because I feel like I've lived like a million different lifetimes since I started writing it. And like, I'm obviously not the same person I was then, maybe not obviously, but obviously. Um, I, I feel like, yeah, it just with every year of life, I was able to have more perspective on. I mean, I was 18 writing a character that was 23, so it was like as I was also 23, 24, 25, literally 25. I mean, up to the last second that I published it, I was still editing parts of the story, writing female characters and writing characters that were not like me in other ways. So it's being a writer, you do have to step into other shoes. But I was 18 writing a 23-year-old, and there are very specific things that I think informed my knowledge of what that was like once it actually happened. I mean, once I was 24 and I was still writing it, I was like, oh, this is not what it was supposed to be. Like I'm older than the character now, and I haven't gotten to make this movie. So yeah, I think just over time, I just, you know, like all of us, I grew up and I just developed more perspective on life as a whole, and kind of just the subtleties of my writing, because, you know, I would like to think that I was able to achieve something um, not as loud as I maybe initially started it as, although that's up to interpretation and that's fine. But I will say that I definitely dialed it down as I got older and realized like certain scenes didn't have to be. I mean, I'm very dialogue heavy. That's certainly something that the hill that I'm willing to die on. But I feel like I was a little more pretentious the younger, you know, and as the older I got, I was like less precious about the pretentiousness, if that makes sense.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I think it made the characters better as I was able to like be around people of that age group more and more and relate and like have those life experiences.
Well, I mean, pretension is that's being a teenager, especially, you know, when you're in that kind of shadow zone between
Yeah,
being a teenager living at home and then being a teenager who's you know, embarking on the real world. You think you know
yeah,
everything and you've felt everything and seen and done it all.
right.
But that's something that, yeah, I was frankly surprised, and this might have been just my own prejudice based on having seen you in Decaf Don and then in The Big Zip. I was
Yeah,
expecting a completely different kind of story. This is one of the most like romantic, big-hearted, like you really feel the spirit of teenage. I mean, I know he's the character is 23 in the book, but he
yeah,
still
yeah,
has that feeling of someone who is still trying to grow up and figure himself out and is
yeah,
sort of emotionally arrested back to like the age of 18. And
yeah,
that's not a knock on the writing or the character, but it really took me back to, you know, a lot of films try and capture romance, but it really takes something specific, a really an in tune kind of voice to the characters of that generation, and also the emotional kind of honesty to capture that, to bottle that and put it onto the page. And I think you really did that. I was having flashbacks to my own, you know, being 18, 19, having a crush on the wrong girl and, you know, kind of doing
yeah,
silly stuff and just being willing to go and do whatever she wants to do, no matter how crazy, and, you know, consequences be
yeah.
damned.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's 100% on in terms of, um, I mean, Vincent was always 23, but it's funny you say that because I initially wanted Faye to be 18, and I was 18 when I started writing it, and she was 18 up until maybe, you know, 6 months ago or something, or less than that probably. So the idea that Vincent couldn't relate to a woman his own age was a big theme in the story that I ultimately changed because I realized that she's still not his age, so that says something, and she's just coming out of her teen years, so that said enough without having, and it was a hard decision to make, I think, because I was like, am I trying to like adhere to, you know, not being controversial, or because, you know, at the very least you want the art that you put out there to, you know, start a conversation. But I think ultimately what I decided was that it didn't she didn't need to be it didn't need to be that Vincent was like, and you know, 18 is obviously legal and things like that, but there's a problematic nature to that I am aware of. As you know, myself, I wouldn't date an 18-year-old at 23, um, let alone 25. But as a whole, I think it was something that I realized that needed to didn't need to be said as explicitly as like, okay, she's 18. So I think, and so there's a scene where where she tells him her age for the first time. It's like well into them knowing each other. And initially the scene went something like, how old are you? Oh, I'm 17. What? I mean, 18. I just turned 18. Oh, you're like, it was like him being happy that she was 18, and not 17. And so it was like something really problematic about that moment. And when I, you know, revisited and really, really thought about it, And it now is her being 20 and saying she was just a teenager, which makes more sense, I think, ultimately to what you're saying as well, like this idea of just being a teenager and having that kind of teenage angst, and that kind of feverish love that takes place when you're that age. So anyway, I appreciate you saying that a lot. That means a lot.
Well, you're welcome. You're kind of getting into something else that a couple of different avenues. One is that it's very interesting that we're talking about a character who's 23 getting together with a character who's just turned 20, and yet there's still there's sort of a chasm there of life experience just in that 3 years. I mean, I'm almost 44, and it's weird because for me and for a lot of other people I know, age stops meaning anything at least past the age of 30. You could be, are you 35 or are you, 42? Who cares? You're just old.
you're just a person with a number.
Right, but as you're growing, into your 20s, it's like every year could be 5 in terms of the life experience and stuff. And in some cases, it was almost shocking to me to find out that Faye was as young as she was, because she seems to have, and we don't get a whole lot into this, it's sort of shrouded in mystery. She's had some experiences that put her well beyond even where Vincent is at. Now, I want to ask you,
yes,
in terms of writing this character, Vincent, Faye, and Mona, this kind of trifecta of characters that we explore in this book, how did you go about writing two very different female characters? Did you just kind of get the ideas and the feelings down and then kind of maybe consult with some girlfriends to say, does this read right? Or did you find that you were just like magically in tune with that voice, and perhaps the 20-year-old girl's voice is not that different from a 23-year-old guy somehow?
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I think, I mean, for the Mona character, I was very confident because I was writing my sister, essentially, my own sister, who has a very similar relationship to me as Vincent does with Mona. And I think that, again, it wasn't autobiographical, but I think that I was just hearing her voice as I was writing the character. And a lot of the things that Mona says and experiences are like amalgamations of things that she has experienced and said, and also like a version of her that she no longer is, just to be clear. Like, she's a much stronger person than Mona, but no, she's had like moments that were similar to that, and where she kind of felt inadequate in her relationship, and things that I just witnessed as her brother that kind of made, and also with the character of Sean, like he's kind of based off of someone that kind of had that similar energy. So I think that was easy for me, not to like whatever, but because I just was thinking about our relationship and we're really close, and so it was just like hearing her voice, but for the character of Faye, that one was a little harder because I'm 25 and I have not been in a lot of relationships. That's just something that has been the kind of draw of the cards. I've not I haven't been in a serious adult relationship. When I was younger, I was in some relationships, but they weren't, I mean, I guess you can't really call them serious. They were like, teen relationships. And so that one I was nervous about because I didn't know if I was going to be able to, I remember like, and she comes like well into the story. She's not like on page 10 or 20 even. She comes in pretty deep into the story. And by the time I got to her, I remember being like, oh shit, like I'm kind of nervous right now, like to write for her, because I really wanted to get it right. And I think for Faye, it was really just trying to give voice to the women in my life. I know, and I have a lot of female friends, and I have a lot, I do have a lot of sort of references in my life, but give voice to those women that are very sure of themselves, at least out on the outside, and also very intriguing and not like sweaty about it, but just like, this is like who they are. They're confident and know that they have a lot to offer, and know that guys want them for all the wrong reasons, but also have an understanding of, how they come across, and how they're able to make things work for them. And I think, for Faye, like it was just like working that balance of not going too far with it, or not giving enough, because she was, it was she was based on some girls that I've had experiences with, and also just like a little bit of even some just people in my life that are just very in tune with themselves, again, at least on the outside, but also have softer sides that are kind of only revealed once you sort of get to know them. And yeah, and then kind of realizing that those women are not that much different than guys that are kind of just aloof and kind of stand in the corner watching things. And I think Vincent kind of has that vibe. He's a little bit more out there, but they have a similar energy in that they both kind of read a room, and they're kind of, a little bit mysterious, without trying to be, I don't think. But yeah, like I know people like that. I've known women like Faye, and so yeah, I mean, to get to a place where I was like really happy with everything that I wrote for her did take some time, but it was like, it felt good when I felt like I felt like I got somewhere.
Did you check in with any of these women or friends, like as you were
Oh yeah,
writing,
yeah.
to say, does this feel, I mean,
Mention,
because that you're kind of writing it from your understanding of what they are like, what they might be feeling. Did they look at it and be like, no, this is totally a guy's perspective?
yeah, and that's a great question, and I meant to put that in the question. I forgot. I didn't, and the reason I didn't is because A, I'm an asshole. B, no. I think the reason I didn't really is because I didn't, and this isn't a dig on anybody in my life, but I really didn't have anyone in my life that I thought was really, really willing to read it before I published it, which is kind of sad to say. But like even friends, like do Justin Finley? He's a friend like that's kind of been around. He was in The Big Zip. I think he was also in DECAF Don. He had a little cameo.
I would have to see him. I don't think I know
He
him.
played in The Big Zip. He played like Oz's roommate in the scene where
Oh,
he's kicked out. Justin Finley. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know him, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
But yeah. So he and actually Noah, who played Oz in The Big Zip, both read, I think so. Justin read the entire first draft years ago. This was like when it was not what it is now. It was very complimentary, had some great suggestions and things like that. And then Noah like started reading it, and then I ended up like just grabbing my draft back and being like, give it back to me, you guys aren't reading. And so that was it though. And that was like, this is 7 years of, and I had other friends that I asked to read it, and just nobody wanted that. There wasn't like, I don't want to read this, but it was like, oh yeah, I'll read it, and then they never got around to it. So at a certain point I just was like, you know what, I need to rely on, like, forget about like being a guy writing for women, or being a 25-year-old writing for other people. Like, just I need to just really be confident in what I'm doing. And this isn't to say that it's as perfect as it could be, but I worked really hard to like make sure everything fit and make sure that everything felt honest. And yeah, I would have loved to have like had some consultants and like people that were like, yeah, this and that. And I had that once I published it. I mean, my sister gave me we talked for an hour on the phone about all the things she loved about it and all the things that she didn't like. And so that was something that I probably could have used beforehand, but it's too late, I think.
What, and without getting, I don't want you to divulge anything too personal or whatever, but like,
Yeah.
that during that phone call, some of the stuff that she didn't like,
Yeah.
are there things that you, when you heard it, you took on board and you're like, oh, that makes sense, or nah, I
Yeah.
disagree, or what was the big kind of takeaway that you might take into another project when you're writing these characters?
Yes. I value her opinion so much, and she knows that, and she better know that. And not to also give like too much away about the book, but it very much is a revolves around her character in a way that isn't evident. I think if the sort of overall, when you get to the end of the book, you realize that it's a lot more about his relationship with his sister than you maybe would think just going into it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something that I wanted to have be like in the background and not super loud, but something that was there. And she obviously being my sister and like seeing the parallels between our lives and her lives in the story, very much saw that. And so she was very responsive to the parts of it that just felt very personal. She said it was a little bit triggering at some points and a little bit confronting at some points. And some of the things that she mentioned, 100%, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. There were a couple of things. I mean, she's just like a funny person in general. So sometimes she says things that are just like, what are you saying? But I think, I listened completely and agreed with a lot of what she said. I mean, it's funny because in the introduction to the book, I mentioned like, there's a lot of dialogue. I hope, this might not be your cup of tea, but like, this is my kind of thing. And she was like, I didn't mind the dialogue, but there were some points where I was like, okay, this last line could have been the end of it. And like, you didn't have to keep going. I was like, okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, she wasn't super harsh, but she was honest. And she was like, yeah, they were it just felt very close to home and very like, just like she was reading like, our life story, even though again it's not autobiographical, but she felt everything that I was putting out there because it's very much written as in our relationship dynamic, like how we talk to each other, especially back at the time when I started writing it, like very kind of dry, sarcastic, like loud humor, but in a loving way. So yeah, I think I definitely heard her, and I wasn't like, and I'm open to, yeah, I mean, I've gotten some really incredible feedback from people and it feels great. Obviously, I mean, no artist wants to hear like you wrote a piece of shit, but I'm very much open to constructive criticism and any kind of criticism, just because it's like I didn't get any writing it, so that was the biggest thing. Like once I released it, I was like, man, this is like not mine anymore. Like I'm gonna have so many different things, but I've gotten some really great feedback, and also I've gotten some not like harsh feedback, but definitely constructive criticism that I'm very happy to take. And yeah, started with her though.
Was there any bit of criticism that surprised you, like took you completely out of left field, that you agree with? Because sometimes people will say stuff and you're like, you're just being a troll.
Yeah, I think no, I think I was pleasantly surprised with. I think I thought everyone would be stupid and not understand like what I was trying to do with the book. No, I'm just kidding. But like I think I was pleasantly surprised with like how understandable the book was. Not that I was like writing some like vague, hard to understand book, but like every element of the book was very specific, I think. And so for people to like have this universal reaction to it, I was like, oh wow, like I guess it was clearly written in some way. And so yeah, I think with if someone had an understanding of what was happening in a scene, there's kind of no way to deny their feelings about it, I think. So if you're telling me, like, my sister did say one thing, and I won't say what she said, but she mentioned one thing about one of the scenes, and I was like, that didn't happen. Like, you're mixing two of the scenes together. And she's like, no, I was like, no, you go back and read it. Like, so that was different because she was like, she mixed something up and got it confused. But no, I think if like you have an understanding of what I was trying to say and trying to get across, then I think I'm open to anything. And in terms of like being surprised by it, that just didn't happen. But I think anything is a surprise because again, like I wrote this completely without any feedback other than Justin's like early feedback, 3 years ago. So
there's a lot of music in this story, a lot of references to songs, and I admit that I should have gone back and like made a playlist of all the songs and tunes that you referenced.
Did I send you a bookmark? I didn't send you a bookmark.
No, I bought this off of I just bought this off of Amazon.
No, I know, but did I ask you for your shipping info to send you a bookmark?
No, you did not.
Okay, that's trash on my part. No, I thought I did. Wow.
That's okay. Does the bookmark have the playlist on it?
That's like the QR code for the playlist. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh no,
I thought I'm not the greatest like like person that sends things, because that's what I've been doing with these bookmarks. Which, by the way, my sister did. She was like, "Buy a book and he'll send you a bookmark." I was like, "I will." So next thing you know, I'm like sending people bookmarks, but I'm bad at keeping up with it. I will send you one. I will send you
Cool.
one. I think I may have. I feel like I did. Anyway, okay, I'll send you another one. Whatever.
Well, I gotta say, it's a genius idea because I'm not the most musically inclined or hip guy.
Yeah.
I just use the phrase hip guy, so that should give you an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I did get the feeling that you were really building kind of a soundtrack to this movie as if this is going to be filmed someday. So what, tell me about the choices when you were coming up with these scenes, like as a song comes on, because there are scenes where you've got a song that just kind of like starts and then you've got it fading in and kind of blending into other tracks. Did
Yeah.
you write the scenes and then think what would go good here, or did it sort of start with the song and then the song kind of took you to a place where the characters would be, like on a rooftop or something?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of both. I think a big thing that I realized about myself um, during the duration of writing it was that I do I love jazz. Who am I? Seinfeld. Um, I love jazz because I experienced it through watching films that heavily incorporated jazz. And so now I just love jazz in its own, but it's still very cinematic to me. Like I hear jazz and I imagine scenes. And so I think there's a lot of jazz in the soundtrack. And yeah, a lot of those songs I heard first and then I saw the scene, which is but yeah, there were other ones where I wrote the scene first. So I think it was a mixture of both. But I think for me, I really enjoy that process of really, because I write to direct, and I've only directed short films in my life. I've been in a few of Nick's films. I've done a couple of short films, but I don't have a whole lot of experience in like filmmaking. But it's my dream. It's all I want to do. Maybe not all, but it's like mostly what I want to do. And so when I write with the intent to direct. So I add directing cues. I'd say like the camera's doing this, like just for my own reference, because I need it because I'm not the brightest person. And so like with music as well, it's like it helps me like really feel out the scene. I can really visualize it. And I'm a pretty visual person, but I mean there's just nothing like having music to really get you there. And so I appreciate you saying that it's a good idea, because it was something I was also nervous about. Like I had a moment where I was gonna go back and backspace every moment where I mentioned the song. Cause I was like, and then I realized, well, I brought it up to a couple people, and I was like, what do you think about the idea of me like creating a playlist with all the songs that I mentioned in the script and like adding it? I was actually going to add it in the book, which I actually should have done. The QR code. I was like, why didn't I do that? I actually did at one point, then I took the page out. So done. But I was like, oh, this idea of like being able to follow along. And some people did that because I sent them bookmarks, and I didn't send you one, and I'm a horrible person. But it was like some people's experience, like being able to follow along, with the different songs. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that people are responding well to it, because there's something I was like, I don't like, some people don't want to hear music while they're reading, but it's also a different experience than just reading a regular book. So yeah, no, some people have responded really well to it, but that was that's a huge part of my writing, I think, is music. I think I will never make a movie that's like, you know, Darren Aronofsky's Mother, where he doesn't use music in the whole movie. Like I feel like I need music to make it feel like something. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but I think I feel that way right now. So I'll get back to you when I change my mind.
Well, I gotta say, it reminded me a lot of. I used to be obsessed with Tarantino screenplays, and
Yeah,
he'll put like music and all sorts of crazy direction in there, but also in the way that you're communicating your characters reacting to each other. You will get inside of Faye's head for a beat. She's looking, or Vincent's head. He looks at Faye, he's into her, or she knows it. That kind of a thing. I'm butchering this.
yeah,
I don't have a specific reference pulled up,
no,
but it's almost like something you would see in a novel that in a quote unquote proper screenplay you wouldn't want to put in there, because it's like you can't direct an emotion, but it feels like the way that you word these things, the actors would know exactly what to do in that moment. So it sort of is emotional direction.
Yeah.
Tell me about, like, when you're putting together the screenplay, not just the dialogue, are you reading other screenplays to kind of figure out the language of it, or are you just kind of putting your novel thoughts down and chopping up to make into direction?
So I think for me, I am not formally trained on anything. Like I have a cooking page as well on Instagram where I like post food, and I like to dabble in things. And but with this, I mean, not to say that I just dabbled in like publishing a book, but I think it started with years of studying. Yeah, I've read a lot of screenplays over my life. I actually like prefer to read like comics and screenplays over actual books. Maybe because I'm a tool, but I feel like at a certain point you just have to like let go and just like do your thing. I read also Sidney Lumet's book um, on how to write screenplays, and so I've done my own studying, but I'm not formally trained with it. I didn't go to college, and so I don't have any kind of like technical training in any of these things. So when it came to that aspect of it, I think there were a few things. I naturally want to be descriptive about characters' reactions to each other because I think that as a reader, maybe not necessarily even as an audience member, but as someone reading the script, I'm thinking about it like as the people that are going to be in the movie reading the script. You want to know something, and I don't give everything away. I don't say like everything everyone's thinking, but in some moments you want to hear like an internal monologue or some kind of like, even if it's like a sarcastic comment, which I have a few as well in there where it's like, you know, I'm also going to butcher it because you know, whatever, but like it's like, you know, uh, uh, there's a moment where Vincent meets Faye for the first time and she walks to the bathroom, and there's like a little comment that I make where I'm like, oh, you know, he's sitting in cluelessness, mostly something like that, whatever. I was like sexless cluelessness, mostly cluelessness. And so just those little like small tidbits of information I think give actors, particularly who I'm really catering to when I'm writing, you know, these kinds of these scenes, um, a little insight into the character. Because you know, as the writer, I did write character bibles for all the characters, the main characters, for Sean, Faye, Vincent, and Mona. And so you know, I know everything that needs, not everything, but I know them deeply. And so I want to give the actors that are potentially going to play these roles um, some insight. And then as you know, a now author that published it to readers to read it, I want to give them that insight as well. I want to like them to feel um, a little bit of what the character that they're reading in that moment is feeling.
Yeah, there. Going back to Tarantino, I mean, if you read his, you know, earlier screenplays and probably even his later ones, I
Yeah,
haven't read Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, for example, but if you look at like Reservoir Dogs or you know the original Natural Born Killers treatment, you do get the feeling this is just someone who loved movies, watched a ton of them, found
yeah,
out there was a format for the screenplay, maybe like looked at a couple of pages, like, oh, that's what you do, and then just
really,
kind of went to town.
yeah,
So I just want to ask some of the peripheral characters, you know, they pop up in the book like at party scenes, and I'm trying to remember who they are because I'm like, oh, they're gonna pop up later in the book, mostly because of the names. There's one character, his name's Two,
that's right.
TWO. Is
That's
that,
right.
did you have a whole story fleshed out? You're like, oh, that'd be a fun name for a character. I'll just throw him into the
Oh, you know,
party.
I met a guy with that name. I was like, I'm writing this to a script.
Was he like a junior or something? Like this is
No,
Jimmy
no, no.
Two.
Very much like the character in the book. It was like a nickname that he went by, and like you know, yeah. Well, that particular scene was like about the dynamics of the Black experience, I think, because Vincent is a Black character. You know, my face is on the cover. I'm gonna play Vincent hopefully when we can make this into a movie. But In that scene, he's confronted by a number of older Black men that have certain stances in the community, and sort of certain positions that they hold, and maybe like even that they feel like they have to hold, that maybe they don't have to, but that they feel kind of pressure to hold. And that's I talked actually with a friend recently about this dynamic of feeling um, inept in a room like that, where you are also a Black man, and they're not, much older than him. They're, but I actually, honestly, not to get too deep, but I did include those kind of funny names because I was in that situation a few times, particularly at that age, being around friends of, I'm just going to say, my sister's boyfriend at the time, and it was something that it was kind of therapeutic, I think, because it was like there's a moment where Vincent kind of confronts one of the characters, and it was something that I had always wanted to do, and obviously, maybe not obviously, but I did not do that. So there's a moment where Vincent is a little drunk and feeling kind of brave and says something, and and it has nothing to do with his inadequacy as a Black man or feeling like he doesn't belong in that group, which he doesn't want to belong in that group, because it's not about like feeling like he wants to be a part of this group of people, and it has even nothing to do with them being Black. It has everything to do with them being really immature and like ignorant. But at the same time, there's a moment where when he confronts him, and it feels like that entire inadequacy is tarnished in that moment, because he's then able to be on level with them and feel like, okay, you know what, being intelligent, being observational, being this kind of dry, asshole, which is a kind of a trope that's mentioned throughout the story. I can use this and be on the same level in terms of like intimidation with these guys that are kind of not even trying to be this way with me, but are also being this way with me. So anyway, I know I'm sorry, there's like way too much to say just about you mentioning the name, but I was trying to I wanted to kind of represent that feeling, something that I've experienced. And then again, a friend of mine told me like, wow, that scene really resonated with me, because I've been in that room where you just feel like, you don't necessarily fit, and not that you want to, but it's there's still something very intimidating about that. And so, I wrote it with like Vincent being, ultimately victorious in some ways, but also with it feeling like he left that interaction and left that kind of feeling behind when he left the interaction as well.
Well, there's, it's one of the moments that when you step back and look at the book as a whole and you realize, kind of like we were talking about, this is as much sort of Mona's story as it is, Vincent's story, because you realize the situation that she's in and the guy that Sean is, the fiance. There's a lot
Yeah.
of kind of tension, throughout the book, and it kind of comes to a head. And I'm not, the word creepy is kind of wrong, but Sean, I'm sorry, Vincent and Mona are so close, especially in kind of the earlier scenes in the book. I'm like, is there something going on here? But then you realize, no, they're just extremely close. And in a lot of ways, Vincent represents, for all of his problems and faults, the kind of man that I think Mona thinks that she should be hopefully spending more time with, had circumstances been different than, say, a Sean type character, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
No, it does. Yeah, 100%.
So, and that's, again, I'm trying to tiptoe around some stuff because I don't want to give anything away. But yeah,
Yeah.
towards at the very end of this story, there's a like a really kind of a special quality to the way that whole relationship plays out. That's kind of cathartic and also sad, but also hopeful, which comes in at the very towards the end of this story, because like I said, you've got this big sweeping romance that kind of goes south quickly in the last 20, 30 pages, and then it gets kind of trippy and weird with time shifts and more of this sort of dreamlike imagery. So tell me a little bit about that? Because there seems to be a definite tonal shift, and it was one of the reasons I really wanted to I want to see this as a film, because I'm curious to see how these choices play out, if it's more cohesive is the wrong word, but a little bit less
No,
jarring from a reader's perspective, as an
yeah.
audience perspective.
So just about kind of the towards the end, like the tonal shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I as a writer never want to be aware of genre. I think that's something, and I've talked with Nick and Joyce about this in the past, um, just about the idea that genre doesn't necessarily do anything other than help an audience member understand what they're watching. And so, and I'm, I'm not like anti-label or anti-genre or anything like that, but I think when I write, I don't try to say, okay, this is the sad moment, this is the funny moment, this is the tragic moment. I try to, like life, and I'm going to sound very pretentious right now. Um, I try to weave everything together kind of the way that life unfolds. Which is like, okay, one moment you're crying, the next moment something crazy happens, the next moment you're talking to a girl and flirting. Like, that's the way that life happens for a lot of people. And I think life also happens very abruptly and very fast. And for a lot of people. And I think that particularly with these characters in this story, there's a lot of substance use in the story. There's a lot of smoking, there's a lot of drinking, there's other drugs. And I think that, oh,
Oh,
am I still there?
yeah, your
Okay, sorry.
camera's cut out for a second. All
Yeah,
right.
my niece and nephew were called. I wanted that part of the book to apply also to the format of the story, especially towards the end where, we're coming to a close, the abruptness of it, the sort of sporadic nature of it. There's a scene during their first date where there's like an entire these series of vignettes that play, that's kind of like a trailer essentially for their relationship. And one thing that I thought was prevalent was this idea of, I think also, yeah, Vincent mentions it when he talks to Mona about Faye for the first time. He's like, it's like I'm in a movie where jazz is playing, and it's like and it's a very like on the nose thing he says, but that was kind of the idea of like making it feel like a movie, like he's living in a movie, like this is a movie. So to answer your question, I think that there was no like, oh, I'm going to change the tone here and like make this very kind of dreamy moment out of nowhere. It was really just about, there's a lot of dream sequences throughout the movie. I think that the point of that was to give you a little bit of insight into Vincent's conscience, because he is holding on to a lot of things that aren't revealed until the end, but that even as much as he tries to avoid and try to not think about, he can't shake. And so, yeah, towards the end, there's a lot of just like a series of moments that come one after the next, and then we kind of fast forward a little bit. And I'm a very visual as a writer, so I can totally see it. And I'm so happy that you asked that question, because I would just love the opportunity to get to film this movie and just have it, be there, because I really feel like it will work. I remember watching like one of those, roundtable discussions with actresses, and Emma Stone was talking about La La Land, which, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, it's not a bad movie, but she was like, they asked her what was her biggest concern, and she was like, well, my biggest thing was what you're asking essentially. Was like, there's one moment where they're like having an argument and they're floating in space. Like, how does that work? I'm like, so I get the idea of, as a reader, like thinking like, and it's not that extreme, but how does this kind of work tonally? But yeah, I think that like tone is a huge part of a huge like part of the story as a whole that I wanted to get to ground, I think, in some way, even though it can be a little fantastical and a little bit surreal in parts. I definitely wanted the tone to feel consistent in terms of like everything kind of feels surreal, even the most mundane moments, the most grand moments, everything feels kind of small. It feels kind of surreal, like it could be hazy, like it could be seen through the lens of someone drunk or high or whatever like that. And so I'm really excited to film it because I'm excited for, you know, people that are knowledgeable about film and knowledgeable about tone like you to see what I was going for, because that, and it's fun to like have it as a book so people can have their own interpretations of those things. I love that aspect of it. It was not something I was super excited about going into it, but once I thought about it, I was like, you know, that's actually a really cool thing to like people, you know, have people's different. And then so that, because one thing I was like, do I want people to know what's going to happen? Like when I make this movie, do I want like, obviously there are books that are based on, I mean, movies that are based on books all the time, but with this, I was just like, do I want people to know? You know, I don't really know how I felt about that. But then I thought about it. I was like, you know, people have their own interpretations of it, as opposed to just like knowing everything, but also have their own idea of how things would be seen and filmed. And that was kind of exciting to me. So,
Well, that's something that I was thinking about, because it does get trippy as an overused word, but it does get a little bit murky in terms of the narrative as things kind of get a little choppier towards the end of the relationship, and then kind of going into the future, and kind of some other ideas that I'm not going to give away. But I was thinking, this almost feels like memory. Like this whole story is Vincent remembering this relationship with Faye and how it all came about. And
mm,
as happens, at least with me, and you know, when I was younger, I had these big, you know, romantic, bombastic relationships with people. You always remember the really important key moments
mm,
very vividly, and those wonderful conversations and the passion and the love making and the dancing on the roof and all that other stuff. But then
oh
when
yeah,
you get to, then everything kind of fell apart, and then maybe you saw them again a few years later, but there's just some kind of stuff in the middle, some business. It feels
yeah,
like you really captured this idea of the stuff in the business, like someone looking
yeah,
back and be like, oh yeah, then they showed up, and yeah, there was a
yeah,
comedy club and all this other stuff. And even the
yeah,
scene at, there's a scene at the beach, which I won't give away the context, but even the way that scene resolves itself with things kind of popping out, I was
yeah,
like, yeah, that feels like a memory, sort of like some kind of inception thing or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I love that take. I think that's very much what I was kind of trying to go for, at least in terms of it feeling nostalgic. I mentioned nostalgia a few times in it, and I think I can be nostalgic. I think the idea of being nostalgic is rooted in being fond of memories, you know, being fond of different times in your life that were um special to you, that you, and even like just like how you felt at the time. You're like, how do I, you know, how do I get that feeling back? Like that was something I did want to explore. And yeah, I mean it's mentioned because of that, because I think that ultimately, yeah, that's all we have is our memories, you know. And I think the idea of not sort of like, because there are moments that are stretched out, but they're more conversational, you know, where it's like these long scenes of talking. But yeah, I was not interested in like stretching out, like even going back to that scene I was saying where they their first date, and you know it's pretty stretched out. Like they go to this place and they go to that place and they have these moments and get to know each other, and those scenes are kind of boring to write because it's like almost like in real life where you're like, so what's your favorite movie? So what is it? So I was like trying to find ways to make it feel more like spontaneous and alive. But even in that moment, I have a moment where instead of, you know, the next scene being like, okay, now they're doing this thing together, and the next scene now they're, and having like 6 scenes throughout the rest of the movie where they're like still getting to know each other. I did this montage where you just see, you know, a kind of trailer again of like their, you know, their relationship kind of growing and them being together. That was part of it, this idea of just like things just happen, and they sometimes you don't expect them to happen, you don't know how they're going to happen, you don't know when or how they're going to unfold, and it's abrupt, and it's the way you remember them, as you were saying, like you just kind of remember it like little pieces of it, and kind of like yeah, in the way that you're like, yeah, we met in 2007, and then like 2012 we were doing this thing. Like literally the way that you remember things, you just jump around. And yeah, it was more prevalent towards the end because I think at that point it came to a sort of close when there was this closure that happened that I won't mention either. And I appreciate you being spoiler free. I was a little bit nervous about that. I was like, please, I hope he didn't say certain things because I do feel very I just don't. Yeah, I didn't want to get spoilers out there, but it comes to a close, and so there's this like moment where, and my sister actually mentioned this. She was like, "I wish I got a little bit more of Vincent's after that." And I was like, you know what? Okay, I feel that because maybe we could have gotten a little bit more into Vincent, but there was this idea of like, all right, I'm moving on from that because again, it's not like he just healed and now he's like, a perfect human being. He still has this kind of fast-paced, impulsive way of thinking, and so I just kind of fast forwarded 5 years later to a certain him finding himself in a way that I was also kind of hinting at throughout the story, which was fun to go back to and be like, okay, actually, let me put a little bit something here that might hint that this might happen or whatever, because that's just the way that his mind works. So yeah, I think it kind of all just bled together with like the trajectory of the story and kind of how the characters saw their lives and how they remembered a lot of things as well. Yeah.
Now, this kind of brings us to the movie. If you were to film this and you go cast and you find the perfect actors and you said you might actually want to be in front of and behind the camera for this, sometimes you'll hear directors talk about, they have a script and then they find an actor and then they kind of collaborate to find or bring more out of a character. You're so invested in these characters. Are you open to an actorly interpretation of, maybe someone finds something in Faye that you hadn't pictured?
Oh yeah.
Could that change the story and then cause you to like retool everything else or what?
Yeah. Well, I'm so open to whatever the experience is going to be because I don't know what it's going to be. I've never had the experience of making a feature film, and so I'm excited about the prospect of kind of anything happening. I am very invested in the story, as you mentioned, and so I'm very protective over a lot of the elements, but not in the way where I'm not open to ideas, open to the idea of something being a little more this or a little more that, or a character kind of having certain elements that I couldn't even think about. I do like if you there's art in the book, which I don't know if you're going to mention, but I do have like the likeness of some people, myself included, but like that I feel very strongly about that they would be great as the characters. But yeah, I mean, there's no saying that like my mind couldn't be changed. I essentially do really feel strongly that and this might sound like arrogant because for people that don't know me, but this is a huge passion project. And so from the inception, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write, direct, and star in this movie. That was just the way I saw it, and the way that I wanted to like introduce myself in the world of film. So it's not anything other than like I wrote this film with the intent to do those things. But I think that there's so much to still explore. And I feel like once the movie is made, and it will be made, I feel confident that someday it will, hopefully sometime in the next few years, that it won't be exactly like the book in terms of finding other things that I couldn't have on my own find, and elements that other actors will bring, that'll make it more exciting, more alive, more grounded. I was very big on excuse me, getting to know the characters through their conversations with other people. And that was one thing, like Vincent had a lot of, obviously he's the through line in the story, but he had like very different conversations with Faye than he had with Mona, than he had with Sean, than he had with the therapist at the beginning of the story, than he had with his friends at the party. So that was something that was like that's your way into the characters, seeing their interactions with different people. And so I think that I'm sure that there will be a lot of developments that unfold from other people kind of finding their way into the characters. I'm really excited about it. I mean, I only know you from being in Nick's films, and I'm grateful for that. Um, I'm really grateful that you bought the book and read it, and that we're doing this. But yeah, it's like I have a lot of things that I still haven't gotten to do, obviously, and I'm really excited to get to do them.
So let's talk about that. What the book is out, it's published, it's out there, people are able to read it.
Yeah,
And it is a screenplay novel. So they're probably wondering, okay, when can I actually see this?
yeah.
What are you, and I know this last year has just been kind of hell on everybody. Although I will say that if nothing else, it was the catalyst for you actually sitting down and saying, I'm going to finish this damn thing. I'm going to write it and get it out in the world. But what
Right.
are you thinking about as far as like actually making the film? Are you crowdfunding? Are you even thinking about like you're in a place to start thinking about it now?
Um, I know that this movie is um it's not incredibly ambitious, but it's ambitious in many regards. And I think honestly, it's mostly with like the music because I feel very strongly about the music, which again, I am willing to waiver some of it. Like some of it, there's some of it that I feel like has to be the way the way I envision it, at least in terms of like just reaching a certain tone in certain scenes. But um, I feel strongly about the idea that I need people on board that are as enthusiastic and passionate about the project as I am. And so now that it's a book, I feel like it's the greatest way to infiltrate people that make films, like infiltrate the idea of like, hey, I wrote a script. Because, people that live in California, particularly LA, talk about all the time how like, people come up to people that are in the movie industry, like, oh yeah, people come up to people, I'm like eating, breakfast at a diner, like, hey, I have the script. And I feel like the most attractive way to present that would be at the very least to present it as a book and like, hey, I wrote this published thing. And so I'm gonna be honest and say that like I'm not opposed to doing any kind of crowdsourcing or anything, but I haven't thought about that. I think I'm really prideful when it comes to asking people for things. And I don't, that's something that I feel in a lot of elements of my life, but I definitely want to see if I can get it in the hands of certain people that I feel um, would be it would complement their you know filmography, what they've already put out there. There are a few people I have in mind. I won't say all of them, but for you, I'll say a couple. I'll say that I do want to get this to Forrest Whitaker, who is obviously one of the great actors of all time, but he's been producing a lot of really interesting, great indie black films. Starting with not start, well, I guess kind of starting with Fruitvale Station, which was I remember seeing that and just being blown away by it. And since then, he's really kind of had a great run of these great films, and he produced Dope as well. And I think he also produced Sorry to Bother You, and like these kind of really interesting, artsy black films. There's also a couple other people, Lena Waithe, and people that have certain, Lena Waithe's from Chicago, and there's also elements of that as well. So I have a plan to kind of get the book out there to certain people that are of influence, just to see, and it's like it might be like a tactic to sell the book, but really, my goal is to make this into a movie. So I think that's kind of my tactic right now, is like seeing whose hands I can get it in. When it comes to like casting and things, it's not going to be an incredibly expensive movie to make. I think ultimately the music will make it kind of ambitious and expensive, and maybe like getting it to look as great as I really wanted to. Maybe I really don't even know what goes into the like that part of it either, to be honest. But yeah, I don't really have any set plan. I just have like ideas and just like kind of an optimistic outlook on like it possibly reaching the right person as a book. So like, hey, there's this book that I wrote, and I hope you like it.
A couple of things. One, is there any concern that if you do get it to, Forrest Whitaker or Lena Waithe or whoever, that they'll be like, yeah, sure. I'd like to opt in this. And wait, you want to direct it and
Yeah,
star in
yeah,
it?
yeah.
We'll buy it from you, but it's gonna, we're gonna give it to someone else.
Yeah, I feel very strongly. I've thought about that, of course. I feel very strongly with the list of people that I've made that I can, as I'm speaking to you, show my passion, show my drive, my, just how much I care about the story, and prove myself if I have to. There are ways to prove yourself as a director. Maybe just like directing a scene, like finding a little place to film, like just any way that I can prove myself, I'm open to do. I feel very strongly about not selling it and giving it away. It's not that kind of thing for me. I've definitely thought about that, and it's something that doesn't scare me, but it's something that I really hope that I don't have to. I really hope I can get the trust from whoever potentially helps me produce it. That I am capable of doing. It's like you don't want to fuck up your. I mean, not to like compare it to like giving birth, which I've never done.
What?
I mean, well, a couple years no, but like, yeah, you don't want to like give birth to something and then just like, all right, I mean, unless you do, but generally you don't want to just like fuck up your creation. So I think if I can show my passion for it, I think all the other parts of it will hopefully shine through. But I'm willing to prove myself as well.
I'm just kind of wondering, you're in Chicago, you're surrounded by a talented like filmmaking community. I mean, Nick. I don't know. Do you know Michael Glover Smith?
I know Michael through Nick, vaguely. Yeah, I was actually going to audition for one of Michael's films, and then, and this isn't a dig to Michael at all. I don't know what happened though, but he reached out to me, and then I was like, yeah, I would love to, and then like I never got the sites for it. I think his latest film that he's making right now, maybe, but yeah, no, I vaguely know him.
Because I'm just wondering if the dream, of course, is to get a big name kind of attached to it to help you, make it. But I'm just wondering, is there a possibility that you could get in touch with them and say, I've got this screenplay novel here. How do I make this here and become like, it could be your first kind of indie sensation? Because I know it's intimidating, making your first movie.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering have you thought about just going out and making the damn thing?
Yeah, well, I was going to, in 2020, I was like, you know what, I'm going to finally direct this feature, and then I ended up publishing the book. I think at this point I have a very ambitious mindset for it, and I understand that. I'm not as connected to any of them as it may, like I was in a few of Nick's films. But yeah, I'm not really like in terms of like that whole community of people. At one time it was like a collective called Cluck Films, I think, or something. Like we were like a collective. I don't know what that didn't live for long, but like I think in general we've kind of all started going our separate ways, and just not in life, but just artistically even. And so that's not necessarily something I've thought about, because it's not. It just never kind of was like as much a part of my life in terms of like this artistic collective. It was mostly like, we got together to film things for Nick's stuff, which was great. And Nick is pretty much the reason that a lot of us know each other. Like Nick was like the through line for a lot of us. And so I think we're all very grateful for that. And I know a lot of great people because of my relationship with Nick. But I think we've all we're doing our own things now. It's not necessarily, and then with Michael Glover Smith, I mean, yeah, he's like obviously a very talented director, and like, at a level that none of us are at. But yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, I probably should have thought of that. But I just feel very strongly, I guess, particularly about also being a Black creator and having like certain and yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily the Forest Whitakers of the world. Obviously that's very ambitious, I get that, but I do just, I feel like this story deserves to be told in the way that that I envisioned it. And I think that, and this isn't a dig to anyone you mentioned, but um, I just feel like it wouldn't get to that point with anyone that I know particularly. So
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting like you approach Nick or Michael and say, "Hey, you want your next movie to be Shelvin' Man?" I was thinking
yeah,
more of if you go to them as they're experienced feature filmmakers. You've made some shorts, so I mean, you probably have some idea of what it takes to put together a short film. But just
yeah,
to go to them and say, let's just say, for instance, I wanted to shoot this movie. What's day one look like? Like, who do I
mm,
talk to? Or is there a
oh
collective
yeah,
of Black filmmakers in Chicago that you know of that, they get together and they have meetings and they kind of produce their own stuff? Or they might have, there's a panel I could go to and talk like, here's a producer, here's a cinematographer, here's a composer I could talk to about getting music rights.
that's a yeah, I get that, and that totally makes sense. I think I have had conversations for sure with Nick, and like certainly like at premieres for some of the films that we did, and um yeah, I mean I have a lot to learn, and that's I think a great element of being an artist in any capacity. I think particularly maybe being a director is like being okay with not having all the answers, but also knowing that you have a vision and that you have confidence in the material, and that will bring you something. I feel like confidence is the biggest part of being a director. I think is like having confidence in something and confidence in and not having all the answers as well. Although as the director, you're someone that um, is everyone's has questions for you, and you're supposed to have answers for everything. But sometimes you don't, and sometimes that's okay. I think, and that's just from that's my understanding. Again, like I haven't directed anything since like 2016, I think. So it's been a long time, and yeah, I have a lot of questions. I think I would love to sit down with um, anyone willing to kind of, for me to pick their brain and like talk to me about the experience. But I mean, I think also um, when it comes to DECAF Don and the Big Zip, um, I was around for a lot of those scenes, particularly with Decaf Don. I wasn't in the first like 20 minutes of it, but I was around for a lot of the scenes, and I think I've seen the collaborations that occur, and I also was in another movie that I was cut out of years before I was held a grudge, that Nick directed, and I think I learned a lot just from watching how they interacted with all the different people involved. So you got, and Nick, very guerrilla. We got just a sound guy, sound person, and camera person, and the actors. And so, but even still, like just seeing like the collaboration and understanding, and there's something to say about like getting people together to do something that you're passionate about and that they become passionate about. It's a really cool thing to see. So that's what I hope to get to, like where I can assemble a group of people. Yeah, even in the vein of like not being the Lena Waiths and Forrest Whitakers of the world, but just people that are as passionate about it as I am and want it to be as great as it can be, look as great as it can look, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think honestly with this, I'm just so passionate about it that um I haven't given any other thought to it other than like the most ambitious thoughts. But I definitely feel like I should probably have a plan B, C, and D.
Well, I'm not even suggesting, you know,
No, yeah,
that
not that
that
you're saying, but now that
well, but
you
I'm saying like ambition is awesome. I just think that you could be ambitious in multiple directions and all of those be option A. Like you send the book out or you get in touch with, maybe you send some sample of your short films out to these larger producers and
oh,
creators.
my short films are trash. Like my short films, they're not indicative of like where my mind is at now. Like I love them, I guess. You know, because they hold a special place in my heart. But they were all like me forcing my nieces to be in movies, or like me being like, all right, I want to make a thing. Can you, you know, like just it was never, and it was also kind of in the vein of what Nick does, where they everything's ad lib. So like I never wrote any of my short films, and like, and not say that's a bad format because it worked well with Nick's features, but for my shorts, I have one short called Mia's Mind that I think is pretty good. And another one called Man Go that actually Nick and Dennis and Greg really liked, Greg Garibay. It's really, really dumb. And I was literally just like playing with toys, and it was a stupid thing that I made. But yeah, I mean, anyway, sorry, you mentioned the shorts, and I had to say that. But I get
Oh
what you're
no,
saying.
well, but you know, I was thinking send this out to, you know, the kind of the upper echelon producers you're talking about, the creators,
Yeah,
but also channel that same energy into exploring kind of your options locally. There's no
yeah,
reason to say that you can't put out some feelers in Hollywood while also saying, you know, I could also start making this thing now. And then, you know, maybe in the middle of, maybe
yeah.
you find that in the middle of getting ready to shoot, you get that knock on your door.
You're
Or
absolutely
you
right.
figure like in the middle of your shoot, you're like, I don't need those other folks. I've got, you know, this thing here. We're going to make something really special.
That makes sense. Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah, I want to make this. That's really all it is, and I think that if I can, yeah, if I can do that, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. I think that's a great idea. I think that for me, like again, I've only thought of it one way, and so you're opening my eyes to like seeing it in a different way, and also just yeah, like it's not again, it's not that ambitious. Other than I feel like the movie itself, like it's other than like the getting the rights to the music, you know, and that's something that I guess would be more of a challenge. But yeah, I'm really excited about the prospect of finally, you know, getting it started because it's been 7+ years now, and now that the book's out, it feels more urgent. Everyone that has reached out to me about it is like, okay, when are you making a movie? You know, so that was probably my biggest mistake with like not changing the format. Was like, oh yeah, people are probably going to be like this is the worst movie that would ever exist. But like the people that enjoy it be like, hey, when is this movie coming out?
Well, you can use that as fuel for the fire to say, well, now I have to make it. But
Yeah, yeah,
and you've honestly some people they say I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a screenplay, and it just kind of it's always I'm gonna, and it never
yeah.
happens. You've got physical proof now that you've done it. So now that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. So thank you for hanging out and talking with me about this. It's a fascinating thing because I've never, I don't think I've had any conversations about a screenplay that is not also tied to a movie that people can watch. So hopefully in the next couple of years or even sooner than that, you can come back on. We'll talk about the movie that was or that is.
I'd love to. Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. It was so great, and really, really grateful to talk to you about the book and that you read it and that you appreciated it and enjoyed it. And yeah, super cool. I'm a big fan of the podcast. So
Well, thank you. Before I let you go, where can people find you? Does the book have a website, or I know I ordered off Amazon, but where can people follow
yeah,
what you're doing?
yeah. So as of now, the book has an Instagram page. So these I just started. I just got these new bookmarks. I had these other ones. I have the QR for the playlist, but these I've just been dropping around the city, like in random spots around the city. I've only been back for just over a week, so but yeah, so the books, yeah, if you find one of these, like don't throw it away. But the books um Instagram page is at Shell of a Man Novel. And yeah, you can just buy it on Amazon. There was like a point when I first published it where you couldn't type out the name and find it, but if you put in Shell of a Man on Amazon, it should be one of the first things to come up, which is kind of cool. Yeah, if you hate Amazon, I apologize, because a lot of people do these days, and I get it. But it's kind of the only option I have at the moment. And yeah, I hope that you guys get it.
Excellent. I do too. So yeah, go check it out. There'll be a link in the description of this video so people can get it directly. And Yeah, Mario Anthony, thank you very much. We have to talk again soon. And
I
yeah,
would love.
best of
Thanks
luck,
a lot.
man. All right,
Thank
take
you.
care.
You too.
Night.